Welcome back, dear friends, and a warm hello to the first-time visitors of my channel. No matter how many years go by, Harry Potter remains one of the most beloved and influential sagas in literary history. But even the greatest stories have their rough edges and the kind that their creators come to regret over time. Yes, J.K. Rowling has openly admitted that there are things she would change in her books, so let's take a closer look. What exactly does she regret most? Enjoy the video. Number 1. The bulldogs Rowling slandered. In The Prisoner of Azkaban, we meet Aunt Marge, not the most pleasant woman, but deeply devoted to her dogs. One of her bulldogs is described as a vicious beast who chases Harry up a tree. But in reality, English bulldogs are gentle, friendly, and even-tempered dogs. Later, Rowling admitted that when she wrote the book, she knew almost nothing about the breed and based the portrayal on old stereotypes. She later apologized to readers, especially those who owned these sweet dogs. Number 2. Dobby's death, the loss. Everyone mourns. When Dobby first appears in the Chamber of Secrets, he's more annoying than endearing, constantly sabotaging Harry, but by the time of the Deathly Hallows he had become a fan favorite. It was Dobby who rescued Harry and his friends from Malfoy Manor, sacrificing his own life in the process. Bellatrix threw the knife, and Dobby died. That moment became one of the most heartbreaking in the entire series. Rowling later admitted she regretted the decision, and if she could do it over, things might have turned out differently. Still, from a dramatic point of view, it was powerful and unforgettable. Number 3. Severus Snape. A death that didn't have to happen. The final chapters of the Deathly Hallows read like a Shakespearean tragedy. One by one, beloved characters fell. Fred Weasley, Mad-Eye Moody, Tonks, Lupin, and of course, Snape. Fans have never quite accepted his death. In fact, a theory still circulates that Snape survived, that as a skilled potions master he could have anticipated everything and taken an antidote in advance. Rowling apologized for his death but never confirmed whether his fate could have been different. Number 4. Ron and Hermione, a couple that shouldn't have been? Harry and Ginny's relationship developed naturally over Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows. But Ron and Hermione? Their romance sparked far more debate. Yes, there were hints, especially in Goblet of Fire, but seriously, a lifetime together. Many fans doubted it, and Rowling later admitted that pairing them may have been a mistake. She apologized for forcing them together and said the decision was driven more by the emotional logic of the author than true character compatibility. Interestingly, the actors agreed. Emma Watson supported Rowling's reflection, and in 2018, Rupert Grint said that Ron probably would have split up with Hermione and ended up living alone in a small flat with no job. Number 5. The epilogue, symbolic yet controversial. The story ends 19 years later. Harry, Ron, and Hermione are at King's Cross Station, sending their own children off to Hogwarts. In a way, it's a perfect loop. The story began with a train and ends with one too, but Rowling later revealed she wasn't entirely happy with that conclusion. Her original idea was to end with a graduation scene, with Harry and his friends finishing school and looking to the future. But after the emotional weight of the Battle of Hogwarts, she couldn't find a place where it would fit. So the epilogue was born. A quiet, symbolic close that didn't please everyone. Rowling even apologized to readers who were hoping for a different kind of farewell. Number 6. Fred Weasley's death. Fred Weasley died with a smile on his face. That's what the book says. One moment he was laughing at Percy's joke. "You actually are joking, Percy. I don't think I've heard you joke since you were..." Then the wall exploded. The sentence never finished. Neither did his life. It didn't feel fair. Fred was joy. He was fireworks and chaos and laughter in the middle of war. He and George were never apart, never serious. They turned fear into jokes, grief into mischief. They made Hogwarts lighter, louder, safer. Even when Voldemort returned, they opened a joke shop. they fought back with colour. The loss hit hard, not just for the family, for us, because Fred was the last person who should have died in silence. And yet there was no goodbye, just his body on the floor, the noise of battle in the distance, George, standing over him, shattered. Rowling later called it her cruelest decision. She said Fred's death was the hardest one to write. Harder than Dobby. Harder than Lupin and Tonks. George without Fred is like a sky with no stars, she said. The joke shop stayed open, but something inside George never did. Number 7, Percy's role in the ministry. Percy Weasley wanted order, structure, respect. He was the polished one in a house full of chaos. While Fred and George blew things up, Percy filed reports. While Ron chased trolls, Percy corrected grammar. At first, it was funny. Then it wasn't. In Order of the Phoenix, Percy turns his back on his family. He sides with the ministry, with Fudge, with Umbridge. He calls his father naive. He tells Ron to distance himself from Harry. The position of junior assistant to the minister is not to be sniffed at, he writes in a letter. Cold, formal, almost cruel. That moment shattered readers. Percy wasn't just being annoying, he was betraying the Weasleys. And when Dumbledore was removed from Hogwarts, Percy stood by. When Voldemort returned, Percy still refused to see it. It wasn't until Deathly Hallows that he came back, and even then it was rushed. One scene, one apology, then Fred dies, and Percy is left sobbing beside his brother's body. Rowling later said she regretted how she handled Percy. She admitted he became a caricature of ambition, a warning sign, not a full character. In real life, she said, people go wrong sometimes, but that doesn't mean they're lost forever. She wished she'd shown his struggle, his doubts, his pain, not just his pride. Number 8. Scabbers and Peter Pettigrew. Peter Pettigrew lived in Ron's pocket for 3 years, slept in his bed, ate at the Gryffindor table, listened to every conversation. He saw Harry plan. He heard secrets. And no one suspected a thing, not even Dumbledore, not even Hermione. The rat Scabbers was just a rat. But he wasn't. He was the man who betrayed James and Lily Potter. He gave them up to Voldemort. He faked his death, cut off his own finger, then hid for over a decade in the form of a pet, Ron Weasley's pet. The irony was cruel. In Prisoner of Azkaban, the truth explodes in the shrieking shack. Sirius pins Ron to the wall. That's not a rat, that's a man. Lupin casts the spell. Peter transforms, pale, shaking, breathing like an animal. The moment was powerful, but it also left readers asking, how did no one notice this sooner? Hermione owned a cat, Crookshanks a half-Kneasel, smart enough to sense something was wrong. He tried to catch Scabbers over and over again, but still it took a werewolf and a fugitive to expose him. Fans questioned the logic. Wouldn't the Marauders' map have revealed Peter Pettigrew in Hogwarts years earlier? Wouldn't Dumbledore have seen it? Rowling later admitted it was a stretch. She said the drama of the reveal won out over realism. She called it a magical moment, but not a perfect one. In hindsight, she regretted not giving a more believable path to the discovery. Something less theatrical, something that made more sense. Still, the scene stayed iconic. The betrayal, the reunion, the twist. But for many readers, the idea that the darkest kind of traitor could live among children for so long without a single adult noticing was hard to accept, even in a magical world. Number 9, Remus and Tonks's fate. They died off-page, no last stand, no farewell, just a line in the middle of chaos. Remus Lupin, dead. Nymphadora Tonks, dead. That was it. 2 of the most beloved characters gone, their bodies lying side by side in the Great Hall, and no one knew how it happened. Lupin had been through everything: war, betrayal, isolation. He lived as an outcast, hated for being a werewolf. He lost his closest friends, James, Sirius, even Peter. Then came Tonks, bright, clumsy, brave. She loved him despite his fears, fought to be with him. And finally, they had something real, something good. Then came Teddy, their baby, born into a world at war, born into hope. Lupin was terrified to be a father, afraid to pass on his curse. He confesses this to Harry in Deathly Hallows. "I'm a coward," he says, desperate to leave, but Harry doesn't let him. "Your son'll know what you did. You'll tell him. You'll show him." Lupin stays. He becomes a father, and then he dies. Rowling later said she wanted to echo the past, to show that war repeats itself. Just like Harry, little Teddy would grow up without parents, another orphan of sacrifice. But even she admitted the pain of writing it. "I didn't need to kill them," she said in an interview. "I just did, and I regret it." Fans were heartbroken. Lupin had already lost so much. Tonks had just become a mother. They were finally happy. And then it was over. No glory, no duel. Just absence. Even their deaths are told second-hand. No one sees it, no one describes it. In the end, all we had was the image of Teddy growing up with his grandmother, Harry watching over him, a new godfather for a new generation. But the wound stayed open, because this time it didn't feel like closure. Number 10, Neville's forgotten parents. Neville Longbottom could have been the chosen one, born in July, pure blood, marked by prophecy, but fate picked Harry. And Neville, he watched his parents fade into madness. Frank and Alice Longbottom, once proud auras, tortured into silence by Bellatrix Lestrange. And yet we barely saw them. Only once do we truly glimpse their tragedy. In Order of the Phoenix, Neville and his friends visit St. Mungo's. There, in a silent ward, he sees his mother. She doesn't speak, she doesn't recognize him, but she hands him a gum wrapper. "Thanks, Mum," Neville whispers, pocketing it like treasure. That moment broke hearts, then the story moved on. Harry never asked. Ron never mentioned it. Even Dumbledore, who knew the full story, said little. And Neville? He carried it quietly. His pain stayed hidden under clumsiness and lost toad jokes. But that moment in St. Mungo's said everything. Neville's bravery came from something deeper than prophecy. It came from loss. Rowling later admitted she regretted not showing more. She said Neville's story deserved space, that Frank and Alice's sacrifice mattered. "I wish I had written more about them," she told fans. Their tragedy shaped Neville, but readers only got a glimpse. No backstory, no flashbacks, just silence. Fans still ask, why didn't we see more? Frank fighting alongside Moody, Alice dueling Death Eaters. Their fall into madness deserved more than a paragraph. They were war heroes, but history forgot them, and so did the books. Neville grew up without answers, without closure, yet he stood with the sword of Gryffindor in his hands and said no to Voldemort. His courage was quiet, his pain untold, but maybe that's what made him powerful. Not because of what he said, but because of what he lived through alone. Number 11, Hedwig's death. Hedwig didn't just deliver letters. She was Harry's first friend, his first birthday gift, the first magical creature he ever loved. When Hagrid gave her to him in Philosopher's Stone, it meant something. It meant freedom, a fresh start, a new life far from the cupboard under the stairs. Hedwig was more than a pet. She was home. In Deathly Hallows, she dies in the very first chapter, killed by a stray curse during the escape from Privet Drive. It happens fast, brutal. The owl screeched and fell to the floor of the cage. Just like that, she was gone. 1 second flying beside Harry, the next, silenced forever. She didn't even get a proper goodbye. Fans were crushed. For many, Hedwig's death hit harder than some characters. She had been with us from the very beginning, quiet, loyal, fierce when needed. She bit Malfoy, she pecked Ron, she braved storms to deliver mail. And yet, her end was sudden, no final moment, no soft farewell, just a flash of green light. Rowling later admitted she regretted it. In an interview, she called Hedwig's death a symbol, the death of innocence, a marker that childhood was over, that the final battle had begun. "I'm sorry," she said. "It still hurts me. It was a turning point, but one she still mourns. Some fans believe Hedwig deserved better, a peaceful farewell, a quiet ending, not a war casualty. She had always protected Harry, shielded him. In the movie version, she even flies into the curse to save him, a heroic end but heartbreaking all the same. Her empty cage stayed in the background after that. No one mentioned it, no one filled it. And maybe that was the point. Hedwig wasn't just Harry's owl, she was his past, and once she was gone he could never go back. Number 12. Harry and Ginny's relationship. Harry ended up with Ginny, married, 3 kids, a picture-perfect ending, but something fell off. Fans didn't buy it. Their love story came out of nowhere and vanished just as quickly. For years, Ginny had barely been on Harry's radar. She was Ron's little sister. Quiet, nervous, always blushing. Then in Half-Blood Prince, she exploded into his life. Confident, funny, dating Dean Thomas, and suddenly, Harry kisses her, right after a Quidditch match. Without thinking, without planning it, Harry kissed her. No build-up, no tension, just a kiss in front of 50 people. For many readers, it felt forced. The real problem? There were 2 Ginnys. Book. Ginny was fierce. She hexed boys who misbehaved. She stood up to Harry, even to Hermione. She had fire. But movie Ginny, quiet, polite, forgettable. She tied Harry's shoe, handed him a birthday card. That's it. Many fans watching the films asked, "Wait, why her?" Even J.K. Rowling had doubts. Years later, she admitted it. In an interview for Wonderland magazine, she said, "I wrote the Hermione-Ron relationship as a form of wish fulfillment," and added, maybe Harry should have been with Hermione instead. That one sentence sent the fandom into chaos. People had seen it coming. Harry and Hermione had shared real moments, danced in the tent, comforted each other, trusted each other. With Ginny, it all happened off-page, or worse, between the lines. Fans were left wondering what they missed. J.K. Rowling apologized. She said it wasn't about logic. It was a writer's choice, something she did for herself, not for the story. But for many readers, that ending still doesn't sit right. Number 13. Underdeveloped Death Eaters. The Death Eaters, cloaked in black and bearing the dark mark on their left arms, haunted the wizarding world with whispers of terror. But behind their chilling presence lies a perplexing void, one of unanswered questions and untold stories. Who were they beyond their allegiance to Lord Voldemort? What drew them to a cause steeped in blood and fear? The Harry Potter series, though rich in detail, offers surprisingly little insight into the inner workings of these villains. We are left with shadows instead of souls, names instead of narratives. Rudolphus and Rabastan Lestrange, for instance, are characters whose names echo with dread, yet whose lives remain largely unexamined. We see them only briefly, most notably in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix, when they escape Azkaban alongside Bellatrix. But where is the tale of their descent into darkness? What whispered lies or twisted beliefs led them into Voldemort's circle? Readers are offered only a sliver of their reality, a tragic shortcoming in a story otherwise teeming with vivid personalities. J.K. Rowling herself admitted, in an interview published in The Scotsman, that the Death Eaters were victims of time and space. "I didn't have the pages," she confessed, "to explore the complexity of every follower. I wish I'd shown more of what made them human and what made them dangerous." It's a rare glimpse into the author's own regrets, and a poignant acknowledgement of the missed opportunities within her epic scene. This omission is felt most deeply when considering the psychology of loyalty. Take Antonin Dolohov, a particularly cruel Death Eater who tortured and killed with a chilling calm. Dolohov murdered Gideon and Fabian Prewett, members of the original Order of the Phoenix, and later participated in the attack at the Department of Mysteries. Yet we never hear his voice, never glimpse his thoughts. Did he believe in the cause, or did he simply hunger for power and violence? His actions paint a picture of evil, but the canvas remains incomplete. Then there's the Carrow siblings, Alecto and Amicus, introduced in Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, and revealed in full brutality in the Deathly Hallows. As enforcers of Voldemort's new regime at Hogwarts, they tortured students and twisted education into indoctrination. "Detention with the Carrows," Neville Longbottom once said, "used to be something you feared, now you just try to survive it." These two became symbols of oppression, but how did they arrive there? Were they born into hatred, or did their path wind more slowly toward cruelty? Rowling does give us glimpses of individual stories, most notably in Severus Snape and Draco Malfoy. Through them, we see the torment of choice, the cost of loyalty, and the weight of redemption. But Snape and Draco are not the norm, they are the exceptions. The rest of Voldemort's inner circle is reduced to plot devices, not people. This contrast is jarring. When Harry sees the memories of Snape's love for Lily, or Draco hesitating on the astronomy tower, the world gains dimension. When Dolohov kills Remus Lupin with no motive shared, it remains a void. Even Bellatrix Lestrange, one of the most prominent Death Eaters, is a puzzle. We know she was Sirius Black's cousin, that she married into the noble house of Lestrange, and that she was fiercely loyal to Voldemort. But why? What in her upbringing or psychology birthed such fanaticism? "The Dark Lord," she whispers in the Half-Blood Prince, "has told me I must be the one to kill you, Draco. He trusts me." Her eyes shine not with fear, but adoration. Was this loyalty born of fear, love, or delusion? We are never told. Rabastan Lestrange is even more elusive. His name appears on wanted posters and Azkaban rolls, yet he speaks not a single line. He was present at the torture of Frank and Alice Longbottom, yet his motives remain a blank slate. Were the Lestranges united in ideology or bound by family pride? Did Rabastan follow his brother, or was he a true believer? Without his voice we cannot know. It is this silence that makes their evil feel abstract. Dangerous, yes, but emotionally distant. The simplification of their backstories risks flattening the entire moral landscape. Voldemort is an arch-villain by design, but his followers needed not be carbon copies. Imagine a scene where Rabastan doubts their mission, or where Dolohov argues with Bellatrix over unnecessary cruelty. Such glimpses would have added not sympathy but depth, reminding us that evil is often forged in compromise, not born whole. We are told that many Death Eaters claimed they had been Imperious after Voldemort's fall. This implies that not all were fanatics and some feared for their lives, but we rarely meet these cowards and survivors. The only character who explicitly tries to distance himself from the Death Eaters is Lucius Malfoy, and even he is reduced to a trembling mess by the final book. "My lord," he pleads in the Deathly Hallows, "my son is in danger." His desperation is real, but it comes too late for us to understand the journey that brought him there. Lucius Malfoy could have been the template for nuanced evil, a man who joined Voldemort for power and social prestige, not ideology. His fall could have echoed Macbeth's, full of inner torment and decaying grandeur. Instead, we see only fragments. He appears in flashes at the Ministry raid, at the Quidditch World Cup, and later broken in his manner, but never do we enter his mind, never do we see the moment when ambition curdled into horror. Even characters like Yaxley and Travers are introduced with menace but little else. In the Deathly Hallows, Yaxley infiltrates the Ministry and participates in the Muggle-born Registration Commission, a tool of Voldemort's regime. "Muggle-borns stealing magic," he growls. But is that belief or propaganda? Does Yaxley sit alone at night, proud of his deeds, or is he haunted by them? We don't know, and because we don't know, he becomes just another name on the enemy list, number 14, Colin Creevey's death. Of all the names etched into the sorrowful memory of the Battle of Hogwarts, one remains forever youthful, small, bright-eyed, and clinging to his camera: Colin Creevey. In a war of giants and legends, his name is spoken in a softer tone, as if to shield it from the brutal truth. Colin was not meant to die there. He was not even meant to be fighting. But the truth is, he came anyway, armed with more courage than most grown wizards and a heart that had never known hatred. Colin appeared early in Harry Potter's life at Hogwarts. "All right, Harry, I'm Colin Creevey. I'm in Gryffindor too," he had said, with an eager grin in The Chamber of Secrets. He was tiny then, brimming with awe and reverence, his muggle-born status only adding to the glittering wonder he felt for the wizarding world. The camera he carried was more than a toy. It was his way of preserving the magic. Each click was a tribute to the world he had fought to be part of. He photographed everything: the walls of Hogwarts, his fellow students, and, most of all, Harry. At first, his hero worship seemed naive, even annoying. Harry found him slightly overwhelming, as did others. But Colin never meant harm. His admiration came from a genuine place. In the shadows of dark times and rising threats, Colin remained a beam of innocence. Yet his story was never meant to stay that way. In a world that demanded sacrifice, innocence was often the first to go. When the Second Wizarding War reached its peak and Hogwarts stood as the final battlefield, Colin had already been pulled from school due to the new regime's oppressive laws against Muggle-borns. He should have been far away, safe, hidden. And yet, when word spread of Harry's return to Hogwarts, Colin didn't hesitate. He slipped back into the castle under the cover of chaos. No one expected him to be there. No one asked him to fight. Neville Longbottom, who helped lead the resistance inside Hogwarts, later told Professor McGonagall. He just showed up, said he had to be here, said it was his school too. Colin wasn't trained, and he had no wand privileges as a minor, but that didn't matter to him. Bravery, as the Sorting Hat said, comes in many forms, and Colin embodied every ounce of Gryffindor spirit that night. When his body was found the next morning, it was Dennis, his younger brother, who discovered him. J.K. Rowling, in a later interview, said, "It broke me to write that. Colin wasn't just a name. He was the face of all those who never should have had to be heroes." Dennis had slipped into the castle as well, and the image of him dragging his brother's lifeless body back through the rubble remains one of the war's most haunting moments, though it was never shown in full detail in the books. Rowling later admitted that Colin's death was one of the hardest to write. "I didn't want him to die," she said, "but there needed to be a face among the fallen that reminded readers how random and cruel war can be. Colin represented youth, belief, and hope, and sometimes that dies too." Her words struck home with many readers who had overlooked Colin in earlier books. Suddenly the boy with the camera became a martyr, not for power or vengeance, but for loyalty. There is something terribly poetic about the fact that Colin, the boy who tried so hard to capture every face in his photographs, had his own story end without a photo. He died before anyone could preserve him in that way. There's no magical portrait of him hanging in Hogwarts, no grand monument in the Ministry of Magic. Only the memory remains, raw, painful, and pure. Harry, though never close to Colin, felt the weight of his death. In the chaos following Voldemort's fall, when the cost was being counted, Colin's name rang out among the dead. "So many names," said Professor Sprout, weeping. "Too many children." She had watched Colin in herbology, saw the way he whispered the names of magical plants as if they were secrets to cherish. In many ways, Colin was a mirror to another boy, Cedric Diggory. But where Cedric's death was public and became a rallying cry, Colin's passed quietly, without ceremony. It was a small death in a sea of loss, and yet perhaps that is what makes it all the more tragic. He was not famous, not powerful, not even supposed to be there, and yet he was. That is what heroism looks like in its truest form. Dean Thomas, years later, recounted to the Daily Prophet how Colin had stood beside him in the final charge. He didn't flinch, he just looked straight ahead and said, "We've got to help Harry." That's all he said. I'll never forget that. Dean's voice broke as he recalled it. Colin's bravery had inspired even the older students, reminding them what they were fighting for. Rowling would later say, in a podcast interview, that she regretted not giving Colin the future he deserved. He had dreams, she said. He wanted to be a photographer for the Daily Prophet, and he would have been brilliant. He had this eye, this way of seeing things most wizards missed. It's a cruel twist of fate that the boy who saw so much would never see the world he helped save. One fan asked Rowling on Twitter, "Why Colin? Why not someone else?" Her answer was as honest as it was heartbreaking. Because war doesn't choose. It takes the ones we don't expect to lose. That's why it hurts. It was a truth many readers had to learn the hard way. Colin's death became a symbol, not just of war's cost, but of stolen potential. Number 15. The Forgotten Hogwarts Students. Hogwarts is remembered as the school of Harry Potter, the boy who lived. His friends, Hermione Granger, Ron Weasley, and his enemies, Draco Malfoy and Severus Snape, seemed to dominate every corner of the castle's narrative. But beyond the Golden Trio and the eternal Slytherin-Gryffindor feud, hundreds of other students walked the same moving staircases, ate under the enchanted ceiling, and fought in their own quiet ways. Their names were spoken briefly, sometimes only once or twice, before vanishing into the shadows of narrative convenience. Yet their stories existed, unfinished, forgotten, and quietly powerful. Dean Thomas, a name murmured in the Gryffindor common room and cheered for during Quidditch matches, had a story worth telling. We know he was Muggle-born, or so he thought. In truth, his father was a wizard who left to protect his family, and Dean only learned this much later. He never knew his father. His mother was a Muggle, and so were his stepfather and his half-siblings, Rowling later wrote in extra materials. During the Second Wizarding War, Dean disappeared from Hogwarts, fleeing with other runaways. He roamed the forest, lived as a fugitive, survived attacks from Snatchers. When he finally reappeared at the Battle of Hogwarts, wand in hand, he fought fiercely. And yet we never saw what he became afterward. Did he become an auror, a painter, as his interest in art once hinted? His story was left like so many others, open, unfinished, and waiting. Then there was Lee Jordan, Gryffindor's commentator, twin Fred, and George's best friend, and a name usually followed by McGonagall's scolding. "Jordan, are you being paid to advertise firebolts? Get on with the commentary!" But Lee was more than comic relief. He joined the resistance, used the radio waves to inspire courage with Potter Watch. Under the pseudonym River, he became a voice of hope. "The next password will be Albus," he announced in one of the broadcasts. Lee risked everything, not for fame, but for the truth. And still after Voldemort's fall, we're left wondering, where did the voice of rebellion go? Names like Hannah Abbott, Ernie Macmillan, Susan Bones, Hufflepuffs who stood in Dumbledore's army, remain footnotes. Hannah married Neville Longbottom, but this detail is buried outside the main books. Ernie declared himself Dumbledore's man through and through and fought at the Battle of Hogwarts, but the story never returned to him. Susan Bones, whose family had been tragically killed by Death Eaters, fought bravely as well. But the series seldom gave them more than a paragraph. Their loyalty, perhaps the truest kind, went mostly unsung. Ravenclaws fared no better. Terry Boot, Michael Corner, Padma Patil, each of them had names, lines, sometimes even a romantic subplot. But the narrative brushed past them. Michael dated Ginny once. Padma was Parvati's twin assigned to go to the Yule Ball with Ron. Terry was among those who stayed behind to defend the castle. But what became of them? Ravenclaws were defined by intelligence, but their brilliance rarely lit up the main storyline. Luna Lovegood, an exception, was given room to blossom. "You're just as sane as I am," she once said dreamily, and somehow her strangeness became her strength. But even she disappeared into the background too soon. Rowling admitted this oversight in interviews years later. "I should have given more space to the other houses," she confessed. "Hogwarts was meant to be a complete world, and I didn't do enough justice to Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw." Her regret was echoed by fans who longed for glimpses into dormitories never shown, classrooms never described, friendships never explored. What did the Ravenclaw common room look like? We only saw it once when Luna invited Harry in. A door without a doorknob or keyhole, but a bronze knocker in the shape of an eagle. You had to answer a riddle to enter. That brief scene revealed a house of thought, curiosity, and poetry. But we were never invited in again. Did they debate into the night? Did they read in silence or argue philosophy? The Ravenclaws. Deserved more, Hufflepuff too suffered from neglect. Its members were described as just and loyal, yet these qualities were rarely given dramatic weight. Cedric Diggory was their shining star, handsome, brave, talented. His death was one of the most tragic in the series. "Kill the spare," Voldemort said coldly. Cedric's fall was the turning point, the beginning of darkness. But after him, who carried the Hufflepuff banner? Zacharias Smith was often irritating. Justin Finch Fletchley had a few good moments, but the house as a whole faded from view, its richness untapped. Even characters like Seamus Finnegan were given one note to play. Seamus, who doubted Harry in the 5th book and apologized later, had a fiery streak, literally, with his explosions in class. "I'm half and half. Me dad's a muggle. Mam didn't tell him she was a witch till after they were married. Bit of a nasty shock for him." His story hinted at cultural tension, identity, and reconciliation, but that story remained unfinished. Lavender Brown, so often remembered as the silly girl who dated Ron, had a tragic arc of her own. She fought in the Battle of Hogwarts. In the final duel, Fenrir Greyback attacked her savagely. The books don't confirm her fate explicitly, but her name is left off the final survivor list. Did she die? Was she scarred forever? Lavender became a symbol of how even those we laughed at could die heroes, and yet she, too, was forgotten. The Patil twins were another mystery, Padma and Parvati, Ravenclaw and Gryffindor, representing not only Hogwarts' diversity, but also the missed opportunity to show how different houses could unite through family. They fought bravely, but their cultural identity, their home lives, their voices, never fully explored. Angelina Johnson, who later married George Weasley, was captain of the Quidditch team, a fierce and focused leader. She grieved Fred, but we never heard her pain, her journey. She was strong and ambitious, yet her character was flattened, her future only known through scattered mentions. Number 16, Sirius Black's lack of funeral. There was no gravestone, no flowers laid in silence, no gathering of old friends. When Sirius Black, the last of the noble house of Black, fell through the veil in the Department of Mysteries, he vanished not only from life, but from memory far too quickly. Fans have long been haunted not just by the suddenness of his death, but by the void left afterward. There was no funeral, no farewell, no public mourning, and most tragically, no proper goodbye. From the godson who needed it most. The scene of Sirius's death in Harry Potter and the Order of the Phoenix is one of the most chilling and abrupt in the series. In the heat of the battle inside the Department of Mysteries, Sirius duels his cousin, the mad and malevolent Bellatrix Lestrange. Then comes the line that altered Harry's world forever. Only one thing mattered. Sirius was falling through the archway, he was falling back, his arms flailing, and then he was gone. Just like that. No blood, no body, only silence. Harry's reaction is immediate and raw. He tries to chase after Sirius, to go through the veil himself. He screams, he thrashes. He's just beyond the veil. He's not dead, Harry shouts. Lupin holds him back, voice trembling. There's nothing you can do, Harry. Nothing. He's gone. But what came after was not the grieving process one might expect. It was silence. It was a strange silence that stretched not just through the rest of the book, but into the next. In Half-Blood Prince, Sirius is mentioned, yes, his death a shadow that follows Harry, but there is no moment when the wizarding world comes together to honor the man who escaped Azkaban, who fought for the Order of the Phoenix, who defied everything to stand by his godson. No service, no ritual, not even a wake in the gloomy kitchen of number 12 Grimmauld Place. And yet Sirius Black was not a forgettable man. He was James Potter's best friend, a member of the infamous Marauders, a loyal fighter in both wizarding wars. He was the first to defy the Ministry's version of events, the one who risked exposure to communicate with Harry during the Triwizard Tournament. He was more than anything Harry's only connection to the family he never had. The two had so little time together, but what time they had was saturated with hope. "I want to live with you," Harry says to Sirius after the third task. "We'll see," Sirius says. "I'll have to check the legalities, but I'd like that too." How could someone so meaningful to both Harry and the story be allowed to vanish without ceremony? J.K. Rowling later admitted in a rare and revealing interview that this was an oversight. She had been so focused on the internal journey of Harry, his guilt, his grief, his descent into isolation, that she neglected the external marker of mourning, a funeral. "I wanted to show the hole he left in Harry's life," she said, "but I do regret not giving him a proper send-off." The irony is painful, because Sirius, who had already been denied so much, his youth, his freedom, his friends, his reputation, was again denied something fundamental: remembrance. And yet other characters received such rights. Even Dobby the house elf was buried by hand with respect and tears. Albus Dumbledore, when he dies at the end of Half-Blood Prince, is given a full funeral on the grounds of Hogwarts, with centaurs and mermaids and a white tomb by the lake. The school is united in mourning. Even Aragog the spider is honoured with eulogies and ceremonial gathering, albeit mostly for Slughorn's potion needs. But Sirius, fierce, passionate, misunderstood Sirius, fades into the background. One might argue, within the story's logic, that there was no body to bury, that the veil, ancient and mysterious, consumed him completely. But does that mean a funeral was impossible? Of course not. Wizards have buried ashes, memory, even names. Dumbledore himself preserved memories in his pensive. Surely the Order could have preserved Sirius's memory too. The other Marauders, James, Remus, Peter, all had a kind of narrative closure. James died as a father and protector, Lily by his side. Remus perished in the Battle of Hogwarts, but not before marrying Tonks and having a son. Even Peter Pettigrew died in a moment of poetic justice, his silver hand turning on him. Sirius alone dies and disappears, as if the story couldn't hold on to him. But it's Harry who suffers most from this omission. He's left adrift. At the start of Half-Blood Prince, he receives Dumbledore's letter. "I will be coming to fetch you on Friday," it says. "Kindly be ready at 11 o'clock. No mention of Sirius. No visit to a grave, no quiet moment in the garden of the burrow to place a stone or say a few words. Harry doesn't get to mourn. He has to move. We see glimpses of his pain, though. When he visits Sirius's room in Deathly Hallows, he finds letters from his mother, photographs, fragments of a life that might have been. Sirius must have known he was coming back, Harry thinks. He'd left things as they were, hoping. It's an unspoken moment of heartbreak. This was a home that might have been theirs. Some fans speculate that the lack of funeral reflects Sirius's own tragic position. He was a fugitive, legally dead to the Ministry for much of his life. Even in death, no one knew what to do with him. The public still saw him as a murderer. Only a handful of people knew the truth. Perhaps, they argue, that's why the funeral was private, unspoken. But that seems like a poor excuse. The Order of the Phoenix had its own codes, its own ways. Dumbledore, the greatest defender of Sirius's innocence, could have organised something. Molly Weasley, who came to see Sirius as part of her extended family, might have baked bread, poured tea, gathered the others to remember. Even Creature, bitter and broken, could have been made to speak. Instead, Sirius's house becomes a battleground for inheritance. It's stripped and divided. His mother's portrait remains, the elf rebels. His possessions are debated. The black family tapestry, Hermione notes, shows him blasted off. It is as though the erasure continues even after death. The absence of funeral also robbed readers of a moment of emotional catharsis. We needed a scene, even one paragraph, to close that door. To say, as Dumbledore once did, to Sirius Black, who lived as he died, free. A moment like that could have changed the weight of Harry's grief, could have offered closure. Instead, the grief simmers. It manifests in anger. In Half-Blood Prince, Harry lashes out. He argues with Dumbledore. He becomes more reckless, more desperate. He still sees Sirius in the mirror of his mind, hears him in his dreams. There's a line where Harry wonders, what if he's not really gone? The lack of finality hurts us too. Even the Order doesn't seem to commemorate him. Tonks changes. She becomes colder, more withdrawn. But her grief isn't given a name. Lupin mentions Sirius only in passing. There's a whole year between Order and Half-Blood Prince, and yet we're not shown how anyone marked his death, as if the pain was too much or the narrative too fast. The fan community filled in the gaps. Countless fanfics exist detailing Sirius's funeral, held in a grove or at Grimmauld Place, or even in secret at Godric's Hollow. Some imagined a Marauder memorial with 4 stones side by side. Others wrote of Harry returning years later, older and stronger, laying a flower and saying, "Thank you." These stories highlight what the books did not: the need for remembrance. Perhaps the lack of funeral was a mirror of real life. So many people die, and the world moves on. War consumes memory. Names are lost. But this wasn't just a story of war. This was a story about love, loss, and the desperate need to belong. And Sirius gave Harry something no one else could: the feeling of being wanted. "You're not a bad person," Sirius once said. "You're a very good person who bad things have happened to." Who said that for Sirius? In the end, Sirius's story ends not with a bang, but a whisper. The man who broke out of Azkaban, who flew on Buckbeak into the night, who offered Harry a home, disappears without tribute. And we, like Harry, are left standing in the hall, watching the veil flutter, hoping that someone somewhere will speak his name. But perhaps that's the point. Perhaps we're the ones who must keep his memory alive. In every rereading, every fan drawing, every tearful discussion at 2 a.m., we give Sirius Black the funeral he never had. We honor him not with marble and ceremony, but with memory, because that's what Sirius would have wanted, not pomp, not titles, just a place in the heart of the boy he called family, and in ours forever. Number 17, the confusing Horcrux plot. Of all the chilling inventions in the Harry Potter saga, the Horcrux remains one of the darkest, a vessel for a fragment of a soul, hidden to cheat death. The very sound of the word, Horcrux, sends a shiver through even the most devoted fan. But as compelling as the concept is, it comes with a tangle of unanswered questions and frustrating inconsistencies that have long haunted readers. Even J.K. Rowling, years after finishing the series, confessed, "I would rewrite the whole Horcrux system from scratch if I had the chance." It is an astonishing admission, but one that speaks volumes about the narrative struggle behind these cursed objects. From the beginning, Voldemort's descent into evil was entwined with his obsession with immortality. When Slughorn tells a young Tom Riddle, "Well, you must understand that the soul is supposed to remain intact and whole," splitting it is an act of violation. The horror becomes evident. But what exactly does it mean to split one's soul? The books are strangely vague on this. We are told that murder tears the soul apart, but is it the act of murder alone that allows for the creation of a Horcrux, Or is there a specific ritual involved? Dumbledore, ever the cryptic mentor, merely says, "Killing rips the soul apart. The wizard intent on creating a Horcrux would use that damage." This lack of detail is frustrating, especially when the stakes are so high. We are never told what spell must be cast to anchor the soul into an object. Is it just intention and murder, or is there dark magic beyond words too terrible for the page? Rowling herself later said she avoided including too much technical information for fear of overburdening readers. But in leaving things vague, she opened the door to confusion. Fans still ask, how exactly did Tom Riddle, a teenager at the time, manage to perform such a dark, magical feat, not once but several times, with such precision? Then there is the matter of quantity. Voldemort aimed for 7 Horcruxes because, as he once told Slughorn, 7 is the most powerfully magical number. But the arithmetic quickly becomes muddled. There's the diary, the ring, the locket, the cup, the diadem, Nagini, and Harry. 7, counting Voldemort himself as the 8th piece of soul. But wait, Harry wasn't meant to be a Horcrux. That was accidental. So did Voldemort intend 6 and accidentally made 7? Or did he intend 7 and end up with 8? This might seem a minor detail, but in a saga where numbers matter, 3 Deathly Hallows, 4 houses, 7 years, it matters a lot. Voldemort's obsession with the number 7 is emphasized multiple times, yet the narrative glosses over the fact that he accidentally overshot his goal. Dumbledore in Half-Blood Prince acknowledges the confusion. He never knew about the 7th Horcrux. But then, was his plan successful or not? Did he achieve the magical stability he craved? The ambiguity weakens the sense of purpose behind one of the story's central mysteries. The most glaring inconsistency, perhaps, is the inclusion of Nagini as a Horcrux, a living creature as a container for a soul fragment. It breaks all previously established logic. We are told Horcruxes are made to last, to be protected, to be hidden. How does one hide a Horcrux that slithers and hisses and follows you everywhere? Keeping it alive makes it vulnerable, Dumbledore says bluntly. So why would Voldemort, so obsessed with preserving his life, make such a reckless decision? Rowling later tried to justify Nagini's role, suggesting that by the time Voldemort created her as a Horcrux, he had grown arrogant, dismissive of risk, but the explanation feels like a patch. In the Deathly Hallows, Nagini is described almost reverently. He seemed to have a curious affection for the snake. It was as if he had come to regard her as a companion. That's a far cry from the clinical coldness he applied to all his other Horcruxes. And again, the technical question arises, how does one create a Horcrux in a living creature? Is Nagini cursed to carry that fragment in pain? Does she even know what she is? Harry's accidental transformation into a Horcrux remains the most debated twist. The moment in the Deathly Hallows, when Dumbledore explains it in the King's Cross chapter, is meant to clarify, "You were the 7th Horcrux, Harry, the Horcrux he never meant to make." But if Harry was a Horcrux, why was he not protected in the same way as the other vessels? Why could he not feel the locket or cup when he was near them, as he sometimes sensed Nagini or the diary? Did he ever truly carry Voldemort's soul, or was he merely a temporary container? Consider the diary. In Chamber of Secrets, Tom Riddle's memory emerges from the book with startling autonomy. It speaks, manipulates, almost becomes flesh. "Little Ginny's been writing in me for months, and I've been growing stronger on a diet of her deepest fears," he says. But Harry, with the supposed soul fragment inside him, never exhibits anything remotely similar. No voice in his head apart from the occasional parseltongue, no personality split, just the famous connection, visions, pain, and emotions. Is that enough to call him a Horcrux? In fact, it was never even made fully clear whether Harry's Horcrux nature protected Voldemort. If the boy had died as a baby, would that piece of soul have died too? Or would it have flown on like the wraith Voldemort became? Dumbledore only says, "When Voldemort turned the curse on you, a fragment of Voldemort's soul was latched onto the only living thing it could find. But was it bound in the same way as the others? That question is never truly answered." There's a moment in Deathly Hallows when Ron destroys the locket Horcrux with the sword of Gryffindor. The experience is overwhelming. Visions appear, the soul fragment fights back. Ron was being told he was the least loved, that Hermione preferred Harry, that he would always be second best. The Horcrux attacked his deepest fears. But when the cup is destroyed, when the ring is destroyed, we don't see the same level of psychological warfare. Why? Were some Horcruxes more sentient than others? If so, what determines that? Dumbledore's destruction of the ring is another mystery. We know it nearly kills him. "The ring carried a curse," he tells Harry, "one that would have killed me in minutes had I not had help." But why does that curse exist? Did Voldemort add a protective spell to each Horcrux? If so, why were the cup and diadem so easily destroyed? Surely he would have treated all Horcruxes with equal caution. Or was the ring cursed because it was also the resurrection stone? Again, Rowling never provides enough information to be certain. Even the sequence in which the Horcruxes are discovered feels rushed. In Half-Blood Prince, we are led to believe that finding them will be a long, dangerous quest. Yet in Deathly Hallows, Harry and friends destroy 4 of them in a matter of chapters. It cheapens the horror we were once told they embodied. One can't help but wonder, did Rowling write herself into a corner? And what of the fragment that resides in Voldemort himself? If he is the final piece, then his death should signify the end of the soul. But Dumbledore says that Voldemort is already less than a whole being. There is no chance at all that he will be able to come back after death now, he assures Harry. But if a Horcrux is meant to protect against death, what exactly does Voldemort's body represent? Is he still functioning with a soul fragment inside him, or is he just a shell? There is a disturbing scene in Deathly Hallows when Harry sees the limbo-like space in King's Cross. Lying under a bench is a small, flayed thing, whimpering in pain. "You cannot help," Dumbledore tells him. "It is beyond our help." It is implied to be the broken remains of Voldemort's soul. But which part? Is this what remains after all Horcruxes have been destroyed, or is it the soul piece that was once in Harry? Rowling never clarifies. Later in Cursed Child, we learn that some remnants of Voldemort's power may still linger, as his daughter Delphine claims legacy from him. But if his soul was utterly annihilated, how could anything of him persist? It makes the destruction of the Horcruxes feel almost moot. Was the evil really gone or simply dispersed? Rowling has said she regretted how late the Horcruxes entered the story. Until Half-Blood Prince, there was little mention of soul-splitting or anchoring. "I was afraid of overloading readers with too many dark concepts," she admitted. And so she sprinkled them in gradually. But that restraint backfired. By the time the concept took center stage, it was too massive to explain cleanly. What remains is a patchwork of compelling horror, fragmented logic, and narrative duct tape. Fans still debate the nature of Horcruxes, still write essays to make sense of their behavior. The mystery behind them has become both a strength and a flaw in the series. On one hand, it gives Voldemort's evil a mythic quality. On the other, it makes the final chapters feel rushed and poorly supported. In the end, Horcruxes are a brilliant idea, marred by uneven execution. They are haunting, yes, symbolically rich, absolutely, but they are also confusing, contradictory, and riddled with questions that the text never fully answers. As readers, we are left to fill the gaps, to speculate, to rewrite in our minds what Rowling once said she wished she could rewrite herself. And maybe that, too, is part of their dark magic, an enigma, as fractured as the soul that created them. Number 18. Dumbledore's Death. Of all the moments in the Harry Potter saga, the death of Albus Dumbledore remains one of the most haunting, heart-wrenching, and controversial. It marked a point of no return, not just for Hogwarts, but for Harry and for the entire wizarding world. The man who had once seemed immortal, unshakable, a constant presence of light even in the darkest times, was suddenly gone. Struck down by a wand in the hands of Severus Snape, a man he trusted, a man the reader wasn't sure anyone should trust, and as his body fell from the astronomy tower, so too did a part of our collective innocence. Dumbledore was more than a character, he was a symbol. His wisdom, his patience, his quiet strength, these qualities held the story together. In Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, when he uttered the simple but devastating words, "Severus, please," the ambiguity of that moment sliced through the reader's soul. Was he pleading for his life or pleading for his death? This duality, as we would later learn, was not a contradiction, but a carefully orchestrated choice. But in the moment, all we felt was the unbearable weight of loss. J.K. Rowling has said in interviews that killing Dumbledore was not something she did lightly. "It was awful," she admitted in a 2007 interview. "It felt like killing a part of myself." In fact, she hesitated over the decision more than once. Dumbledore had been in many ways the last adult protector Harry had. From the very beginning, when he left the infant Harry on the Dursleys' doorstep, to the end of his 6th year, Dumbledore was the architect of Harry's path. Removing him from the story was like removing the last safety net. And yet it had to happen. Rowling explained that for Harry to truly grow up, to truly face Voldemort on his own terms, Dumbledore could no longer be there to guide him. "There comes a time," she said, "when every hero has to walk alone." Still, readers were left grieving not just a character, but a sense of security that vanished the moment Dumbledore's body hit the ground. Hogwarts would never again feel like the safe haven it once was. The irony, of course, is that Dumbledore had orchestrated his own death. Terminally cursed by Marvolo Gaunt's ring, one of Voldemort's Horcruxes, Dumbledore knew he had only a year to live. Rather than die at the hands of the curse, he made a pact with Severus Snape. When the time came, it would be Snape who would kill him. In doing so, Snape would cement his position within Voldemort's inner circle and spare Draco Malfoy from becoming a killer. It was a brutal decision, but a calculated one, a final sacrifice by a man who had spent his life trying to shield others from harm. What made this decision even more devastating was that it robbed the reader of Dumbledore's presence during the final battle. Imagine, for a moment, what the Battle of Hogwarts might have looked like had Dumbledore been alive. His command of magic, his understanding of Voldemort's psyche, his leadership, these could have changed everything. Instead, we were left with a void. McGonagall rose to the occasion, yes, and Harry matured into the leader he was meant to be. But even so, one can't help but wonder what might have been different if Dumbledore had been there to fight. Rowling later acknowledged this as one of her deepest regrets. "When I reread the final chapters," she said in an online Q&A, "I felt Dumbledore's absence more than I expected. It was like losing a guiding star." She even apologized to fans who missed his wisdom in those final moments. While the ghost of Dumbledore lingered, through memories, through the portrait in the headmaster's office, his living voice, his dynamic energy, was gone. And we all felt it. Dumbledore's death also cast a long shadow over Snape. For most of the final book, we were left unsure. Had Snape truly betrayed Dumbledore? Was he the villain we feared, or was he playing a deeper game? The answer, as revealed in the heartbreaking chapter The Prince's Tale, was as complex as the man himself. Snape had loved Lily Evans, Harry's mother, with a depth that shaped the entire course of his life, and it was that love that compelled him to protect Harry, even when Harry was the son of his greatest enemy. Killing Dumbledore was Snape's ultimate test of loyalty, and it nearly broke him. There's a moment in that same chapter when Snape, upon seeing Lily's body, crumples beside her and cries. That one image reframes everything we thought we knew. It doesn't erase his cruelty or the pain he caused, but it makes his choices and Dumbledore's trust in him something profound. Dumbledore, who always saw the bigger picture, had recognized in Snape the same self-destructive guilt that haunted his own past. He saw that Snape, like himself, was trying to make amends. And make no mistake, Dumbledore had his own sins, his youthful friendship with Gellert Grindelwald, his thirst for power, the death of his sister Ariana. These were scars he carried to the grave. He once told Harry, "Do not pity the dead, Harry. Pity the living, and above all, those who live without love." He knew what it meant to live with regret. Perhaps that is why he saw something redemptive in Snape, and perhaps that is why he accepted his own death as part of the price he had to pay. There's a striking scene in Deathly Hallows when Harry, after being hit with the killing curse, meets Dumbledore in a liminal space that looks like King's Cross Station. Here, Dumbledore is calm, radiant, and wise as ever. He explains the final truths about the Hallows, about the fragment of Voldemort's soul in Harry, about Harry's choice to return. "You are the true master of death," Dumbledore tells him. In that moment, we glimpse the Dumbledore we missed so dearly, gentle, yet guiding. But this was only a shadow. The real Dumbledore was gone. That loss resonates in the quiet moments, when Harry buries Dobby, when Ron destroys the locket, when Hermione wipes her parents' memories. These are choices they make alone without Dumbledore's counsel. They are stronger for it, but it's a strength forged in grief. Dumbledore's absence forced them to become the adults he always believed they could be. He died believing in them. Rowling has said she modelled Dumbledore in part after Gandalf, but also after the archetype of the flawed mentor. He is not perfect. He manipulates. He withholds the truth. He gambles with lives, and yet he loves. He protects. He learns. His arc is not one of infallibility, but of growth. He goes from a man who once dreamed of ruling the world with Grindelwald to a man who gives his life so that others may be free. The scene of his death is crafted with such tension and beauty that it remains one of the most cinematic in the series. The dark mark above the astronomy tower, Draco trembling with his wand, the arrival of the Death Eaters, and then Snape, quiet and cold, stepping forward to do what no one else could. Avada Kedavra, the green light, the silence, the fall. We saw it through Harry's paralyzed eyes, and we felt every beat of it in our bones. In the days that followed, the wizarding world mourned. The funeral was a moment of aching beauty, centaurs in the forest, merpeople in the lake, forks crying into the sky. It felt real because it was real to us. Rowling poured her own sorrow into that chapter, and we, in turn, poured out our own. It was fiction, yes, but it was also grief. The real power of Dumbledore's death was not just in the event itself, but in what followed, in how it shaped the characters left behind, in how it forced them to rise, in how it made the reader understand that no one, not even the greatest wizard of the age, was invincible, that sometimes the only way to win a war is to trust those who will come after you. Even years later, fans continue to debate whether Dumbledore should have survived, whether he might have found another way, whether he was right to burden Harry with such a heavy destiny. But perhaps the point is not whether he was right. Perhaps the point is that he tried. He did what he believed was necessary, and he paid the price. We are left with his words, his wisdom, his mistakes, his humanity. And in the end, that is what made Albus Dumbledore so unforgettable, not just his magic, but his heart. His death broke us, but in doing so it made the story whole. Number 19, Harry's emotional trauma. When Harry Potter sat on the cold stone steps of number 4, Privet Drive, clutching a letter addressed to the cupboard under the stairs, no one paused to wonder about the boy's silence. Not the neighbours, not the Dursleys, and certainly not Vernon, who snatched the envelope from Harry's hands with such force that his knuckles turned white. This was not just a child with a scar. This was a child who had spent the first 11 years of his life believing he was unloved, unwanted, and unworthy. And yet, in the pages of the most beloved wizarding saga of our time, his pain is rarely unpacked. J.K. Rowling gave us a boy who lost everything before he could speak. His parents, Lily and James, died protecting him. A mother who died screaming his name. A father whose last word was likely Lily before the flash of green light. That night, as Sirius Black later said, Lily and James put their trust in the wrong person. But no one, not even Dumbledore, truly stopped to ask Harry, what does it feel like to be the boy who survived that? When he arrived at Hogwarts, the world celebrated him. They called him the boy who lived. Whispers followed him down corridors. He was a symbol before he was a person. Yet, trauma doesn't fade just because the world claps for you. On the contrary, it tightens its grip. In the Sorcerer's Stone, Harry looks into the mirror of Erised and sees not glory, not Quidditch victories, but his parents, quiet, smiling, whole. "I show not your face, but your heart's desire," says Dumbledore, and in that moment, the audience glimpses the gaping wound beneath Harry's calm. But then, like so many moments of vulnerability, it is left to evaporate. Consider the cupboard, a child made to live in a cramped space beneath the stairs, not once, but for years. In the Chamber of Secrets, Uncle Vernon shouts, "You've just ruined the punchline of my Japanese golfer joke," when Harry warns him of Dobby's presence. Harry is locked in his room, given a cat flap for food, and barred from contact with anyone. How is that different from imprisonment? If this were any Muggle child, we'd call it abuse. But in the wizarding world, it becomes comic relief. Rowling later admitted in interviews that she simplified Harry's emotional response. "I was writing for children," she said. "I wanted them to feel strong, to see courage, but I do think sometimes I wish I had let him cry more." This admission, while poignant, only deepens the question. What would Harry look like, truly, if he had been allowed to feel? When Cedric Diggory dies in the Goblet of Fire, Harry is only 14. He touches Cedric's dead body, trembling, whispering, "He's back. Voldemort's back." No counselor, no debriefing. Fudge denies what Harry saw. He is left alone with his terror. In Order of the Phoenix, the aftermath is clear. He isolates himself, lashes out at Ron and Hermione, feels abandoned. "I don't want to be anyone's hero," he snaps. The anger is real, but fleeting. Rowling gives us a glimpse, but never stays in the moment long enough. The pain is painted in brief strokes, never the full canvas. Sirius Black's death is perhaps the clearest fracture in Harry's soul. In the Department of Mysteries, Sirius falls through the veil, and Harry, in stunned disbelief, screams his name again and again. He's just behind the curtain. He'll come back, he insists. But he doesn't. The man who was closest to a father figure is gone. Lupin holds him back as Harry tries to run after Sirius. "There's nothing you can do, Harry. The scene, nothing." Lupin's voice breaks, but Harry's doesn't. He shouts, he resists, but there is no breakdown, no collapse, no long silence to let the grief breathe. Voldemort tortures him in body and mind. In the Order of the Phoenix, Harry is possessed by the Dark Lord himself. He feels a burning, a shredding in his mind. He sees Arthur Weasley attacked, hears the voices of death, and still, no therapy, no guidance. Dumbledore, in his guilt, avoids him. "I cared about you too much," he says later. But the damage was done. Harry is left to grapple with visions, nightmares, fear of being evil, and no one steps in to say, "You are allowed to be scared." The weight of being the chosen one is a burden that isolates. Harry becomes a vessel of prophecy. As Dumbledore reveals in The Half-Blood Prince, Neither can live while the other survives. Translation: Harry must die, or Voldemort must. This knowledge alone should shatter any 17-year-old. And yet Harry does not crumble. He walks to his death in the forest, guided by the ghosts of his parents, Sirius and Lupin. "You'll stay with me?" he asks. "Until the very end," his mother says. It's one of the most heartbreaking lines in the series, but Harry's emotional reaction is barely explored. There is a passage in The Deathly Hallows after Dobby dies where Harry finally slows down. He digs a grave without magic. Harry dug with a kind of fury, relishing the manual work, glorying in the non-magic of it, for every drop of his sweat and every blister felt like a gift to the elf who had saved their lives. It's a moment of sorrow, a real, physical manifestation of grief. But even here, Rowling pulls away quickly. The emotional fallout is touched, not examined. How would trauma manifest in a real teenager who had lived Harry's life? Nightmares, flashbacks, anxiety, depression, survivor's guilt, all symptoms of PTSD. Yet in the epilogue, 19 years later, Harry is whole, happy, healed. There's no mention of therapy, no hint that he still feels the echoes of the war. All was well, the final words say, but was it? Neville Longbottom, too, bore scars. His parents were tortured into insanity by Bellatrix Lestrange. He visits them in St. Mungo's, gives his mother empty candy wrappers. "She likes giving them to me," he tells Harry quietly. Neville shows the quiet perseverance of trauma, the slow grief. But Harry's pain is often overshadowed by his role. He is the hero, and heroes must be brave. In the Order of the Phoenix, Harry dreams of long corridors, locked doors, and whispers in the dark. These dreams are not just visions, they're trauma symbols. The locked door he cannot open could symbolize the pain he cannot process. Yet, instead of a psychologist or a friend who truly listens, he's given occlumency lessons by Snape, a man who loathes him. When Harry screams in pain, Snape snarls, "Control your emotions, Potter!" It's discipline, not compassion. Ron and Hermione, for all their loyalty, are unequipped to help. When Harry's behavior becomes erratic, they try to be there, but never once do they sit him down and say, "You've been through too much." In the Deathly Hallows, Harry listens to Ron's radio show for signs of the dead. He counts names, waits for one to be his friend. This is quiet grief. But again, Rowling glances at it, then turns the page. There's a moment in The Goblet of Fire when Molly Weasley hugs Harry after the third task. "You're as good as," she whispers, when he mumbles that he doesn't have family. It's a tender line, but fleeting. Molly loves him, yes, but the family structure Harry needs, the safety, the therapy, the healing, never fully arrives. It's borrowed comfort, not rooted support. When Fred Weasley dies, the world shatters for the Weasley family, but Harry has no time to mourn. He sees Lupin and Tonks lying hand in hand, dead, and still he walks on. There is no moment where Harry weeps over them, no passage where he asks, "Why them and not me?" Survivor's guilt is silent, but powerful. And yet, we are told Harry is ready to die, ready to move on. Many adult readers have reflected on this omission. The older the audience becomes, the more glaring the absence of mental health support feels. Harry is brave, yes. But courage does not mean absence of fear. It means surviving despite it. And sometimes surviving means breaking down. Rowling's later reflections acknowledge this. In interviews, she said, Harry should have had therapy. All of them should. That generation was shattered. She even wrote essays post-publication, exploring the long-term damage. But it wasn't in the books, and for many readers that absence left a hole, a boy who survived everything but was never truly allowed to feel it. Even Voldemort, with all his evil, was a product of trauma. The orphanage, the neglect, the need for control. Dumbledore tried to intervene, but it was too late. And yet, the same Dumbledore who saw Tom Riddle's descent into darkness never sat with Harry and asked, "Are you okay?" Not really. He explained, he guided, but he never truly helped Harry carry the weight. In The Half-Blood Prince, Harry drinks Felix Felicis, feels luck, feels ease. It's the one time he laughs without burden. Imagine if he had had that lightness more often, not through magic, but through healing, through time, through acknowledgement. Harry Potter is a tale of bravery, friendship, sacrifice. But beneath the spells and the heroics lies a boy with scars the books rarely name. A boy who never asked to be the chosen one, who only ever wanted to be loved. And perhaps if Rowling had dared to let him break, we would have seen just how strong he truly was. Number 20. Lack of a global wizarding world. When Harry Potter first learned he was a wizard, the world that opened before him felt impossibly vast. From the moving staircases of Hogwarts to the hidden shops of Diagon Alley, from the dragons of the Triwizard Tournament to the misty moors haunted by Dementors, magic felt everywhere. And yet, as readers closed the final pages of Deathly Hallows, a curious silence lingered. Where were the wizards of Asia, Africa, South America, and Oceania? Did magic only bloom in the stone halls of Britain and the shadowed forests of Eastern Europe? In truth, the magical world beyond Britain remained mostly a whisper, a footnote here, a name there. We heard of Beaubaton, nestled in the French Pyrenees, its carriages pulled by winged horses, Durmstrang, cold and secretive, perhaps somewhere in the north, where the cold bites the skin. Victor Krum, brave, gruff, and loyal, gave us a glimpse of the Bulgarian wizarding community. Madame Maxime, towering and proud, brought with her the grace of the French magical aristocracy. But what of the rest? The question grew louder with time. Fans began to ask, where are the Asian sorcerers? Do Native American witches wield different spells? Is there a hidden magical capital in the sands of Egypt or the mountains of Peru? In an interview, Rowling once admitted, "I do regret not showing more of the global wizarding community. The story was so centered around Harry, around Britain, that it naturally stayed there. But for a world built on the infinite, the local nature of it all felt oddly constrained." It wasn't until Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them that Rowling tried to stretch her wings beyond Europe. In the 2016 film, we are taken to New York in the 1920s. The American wizarding world bursts forth in color and contradiction, nomads instead of muggles, MACUSA instead of the Ministry of Magic. We meet Queenie and Tina Goldstein, Jacob the Baker, and of course, Newt Scamander, the oddball hero who loves creatures more than people. Yet even in this attempt, the story rarely delves into the deep cultural roots of American wizardry. Where were the indigenous magical traditions, the old spells of the Lakota, or the myths of the Iroquois? Rowling later posted online that Native American magic was woven into the fabric of the Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry, hidden on Mount Greylock in Massachusetts. The school was founded by Isolde Sayre, a descendant of Salazar Slytherin, who fled England to escape dark magic and blood prejudice. Isolde's story is rich. She marries a no-mage, raises adopted children, and names the houses after magical creatures of American lore: Horned Serpent, Wampus, Thunderbird, and Pukwudgie. Each name is borrowed from indigenous mythology, and while the intent may have been respectful, critics noted that this blend of real-world belief systems with fictional elements felt oversimplified, perhaps even careless. In Asia, magic was almost entirely invisible in the original books. No characters from China, India, or Japan attend the Triwizard Tournament. When Cho Chang, a rare Asian character, is introduced, her portrayal is largely defined by her relationship to Cedric Diggory and Harry, with little exploration of her culture or magical background. Fans longed to know, did China have a magical academy hidden in the peaks of the Himalayas? Did Japanese wizards ride thunderbirds across the skies of Kyoto? Eventually, Rowling revealed a few tantalizing names. Mahotokoro, the Wizarding School of Japan, located on the volcanic island of Minami Iwo Jima, is known for its strict discipline and students' exceptional Quidditch skills. Students wear enchanted robes that change color as they grow in magical ability, shifting from pink to gold. To reach gold, Rowling wrote, is a mark of greatest honor. But aside from these details, the life, beliefs, and traditions of these wizards remain hidden behind a veil of mystery. The same could be said for Wagadu, the largest wizarding school in Africa, supposedly located in the mountains of the moon in Uganda. Rowling described its stone structures, which shimmer in the air and are carved into the rock itself. Its students are said to be masters of astronomy and transfiguration, and often perform spells with hand gestures rather than wands. One girl from Wagadu, Babajide Akingbade, even rose to become supreme mugwump of the International Confederation of Wizards. A fact quietly mentioned in Pottermore, but still we never saw her, we never heard her voice. This absence was not lost on readers. Some expressed disappointment that such cultures were introduced only through brief online lore rather than woven into the main narrative. A fan once wrote, "It's not enough to name-drop a school in Africa. We wanted to feel the heat of the savannah, the drums of spellcasting, the dust in the air when a charm went wrong. Stories build bridges, and many felt these bridges were only half-built." In Brazil, the school of Castelo Bruxo sits deep in the Amazon rainforest, its structure protected by Caipora, small, furry spirit beings who are fierce and mischievous. The school is known for its excellence in herbology and magizoology. Rowling described it as a temple-like structure covered in moss and vines, with a reputation for producing gifted potion makers. Again, the details spark the imagination. But in the core story, the canon, as fans say, Castelo Bruxo never appears. And what of Australia? No school has been officially named for the continent, though Rowling hinted at smaller institutions scattered throughout the southern hemisphere. A curious omission, considering the rich mythology of Aboriginal cultures and the vast wildness of the outback. One could imagine a wizard tracking magical creatures across the desert, reading omens in the stars, or casting enchantments in sacred groves. In the core books, global cooperation between wizarding communities is rarely shown. Yes, the Triwizard Tournament brought together 3 schools, but even then the focus remained on Hogwarts. The Quidditch World Cup in Goblet of Fire introduces us to the Bulgarian and Irish teams, and a brief mention of other countries. Uganda has been eliminated, Ludo Bagman proclaims, but it's a surface-level touch. We're told of Victor Crumb diving like a hawk, but never meet his teammates. The Irish team wins, but we learn little of their training, their traditions. In Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore meets with the head of the International Confederation of Wizards, and there's a sense that Voldemort's return has global implications. But again, the action remains firmly within British borders. Even Grindelwald, a European dark wizard, was known worldwide, yet the resistance against him felt vague and distant, like a history lesson half forgotten. It's curious, too, that magical creatures seem to have more international travel rights than witches and wizards. Newt Scamander crosses borders with his briefcase full of beasts, nifflers, bowtruckles, occamys, each tied to a culture and continent. But the wizards themselves, strangely static. The magical passport remains unissued. Why, then, did Rowling keep the magical world so provincial? Part of the answer lies in narrative focus. Harry's world was deliberately narrow, she once explained. He was discovering everything for the first time, and as he grew, so did his understanding, but his feet never left Britain. There is truth in that. But even so, by Book 5, when the stakes are global, readers expected more. And when Rowling tried to expand the lore post factum, Through Pottermore essays and Fantastic Beasts films, it often felt like patchwork. Names without faces, cultures without stories, beautiful ideas but with no roots. In storytelling, roots matter. A tree can only grow if its roots go deep. Fans have since filled in the blanks. Countless fanfictions explore the hidden temples of Vietnamese wizards, the ice caves of Arctic shamans, the cursed ruins of Egyptian sorcerers. Artists paint Korean witches dancing with fire dragons, Indian potion masters brewing mandrake oil under the full moon. These stories, born of love and imagination, are testaments to the hunger readers feel to belong in the magical world, to know that magic speaks all languages, not just English. The world of Harry Potter remains beloved, and rightly so, but it also remains incomplete. The wand has pointed in many directions, but the spell was never finished. Somewhere, in a jungle, a Peruvian wizard may be dueling with shadow. In the streets of Cairo, a girl may be whispering charms into sand. In the frostbitten taiga, a shaman may be listening to the hum of the trees. Number 21, Cho Chang's one-dimensional arc. It all began with a Quidditch match. High above the roaring crowd, amid the icy wind of a late-autumn Hogwarts sky, Harry Potter caught sight of her. Cho Chang, seeker for Ravenclaw, graceful as a swan on a broomstick, her long black hair trailing behind her like a banner. Harry, still just a fourth year, felt his stomach twist, not with fear or nerves, but with the sudden bewildering pang of teenage infatuation. It was innocent, it was sweet, and it was destined for heartbreak. Cho wasn't just the girl Harry fancied. She was a fifth-year prefect, a skilled flyer, and one of the most popular girls in her house. She had the attention of Cedric Diggory, the handsome and noble Hufflepuff champion. But Cho had something else as well. She had depth. When we first met her, she wasn't just a romantic interest or an attractive face in the crowd. She was bright, perceptive, and strong-willed enough to later defy authority by joining Dumbledore's army. So why then was she reduced to tears and jealousy in nearly every scene that followed? To understand the trajectory of Cho Chang, we must look at the moment everything changed: Cedric's death. In the graveyard of Little Hangleton, Cedric was murdered by Peter Pettigrew on Voldemort's orders. It was a turning point for the wizarding world, but for Cho it was personal devastation. The boy she cared for was not just dead, he was discarded like an afterthought in a conflict far beyond her control. "Kill the spare," Voldemort had said coldly, and just like that Cedric was gone. No closure, no explanation, just death. By the time Harry sees Cho again in Order of the Phoenix, the girl he once watched on a broom with longing eyes has become someone else entirely. "Hi, Harry," she says awkwardly in Madame Puddifoot's tea shop, her voice trembling with the weight of emotion. She is still grieving, still raw, still seeking something, perhaps comfort, perhaps understanding. Harry, in his own way, tries, but he's no more equipped to handle Cho's sorrow than she is to explain it. Their date becomes a disaster, culminating in silence, misunderstandings, and mutual disappointment. She cries. He freezes, and thus the slow unraveling of Cho Chang begins. It's easy to dismiss Cho as the girl who cried too much. That's what some readers did. But that's not just unfair, it's untrue. What Cho embodies is unprocessed grief. She is a 16-year-old girl who watched her boyfriend die, who is now tangled in the politics of a school that doubts the truth, and who finds herself drawn to the one person who was there when Cedric died. How do you navigate that? Rowling, in a later interview, confessed, "I did not do Cho justice. I focused too much on her pain. She deserved more than just being the sad girl." Role in Dumbledore's army should have been her moment to evolve. She wasn't afraid to stand up against Umbridge's tyranny. She trained with determination. In the room of requirement, she was among those who believed in Harry's truth. And yet the moment her friend Marietta Edgecombe betrayed the group under duress, let's not forget, Cho's loyalty was questioned, and with that, her place in the story began to dissolve. It's important to note that Cho did not betray Dumbledore's army. It was Marietta, coerced by her mother's position in the ministry. Cho tried to defend her friend, and perhaps that was her mistake in Harry's eyes, but was it wrong to try and protect someone she cared about? That complexity, torn between two loyalties, is deeply human. Still, Cho was pushed out. "We're not meeting again," Harry tells her shortly afterward, and just like that she's gone. The tragedy isn't just in Cho's grief, it's in how she was written into a corner. In Half-Blood Prince, she's barely mentioned. In Deathly Hallows, she returns briefly to fight in the Battle of Hogwarts, but by then, her presence is almost ceremonial. When she offers to accompany Harry to Ravenclaw Tower, Ginny cuts in. "He doesn't need to be escorted," she says, sharply. That single line, meant to assert Ginny's place, effectively seals Cho's fate as a narrative afterthought. Yet there are glimmers of what could have been. Cho was a member of the DA. She fought. She survived. In a world where so many were broken or lost, Cho endured. We can imagine beyond the pages that she became someone remarkable. Perhaps she became a healer, helping others manage the pain she knew so intimately. Perhaps she worked for magical law, ensuring no other student would endure what she did. But the books don't tell us, they leave her in the shadows. One quote from Order of the Phoenix stands out for its quiet, heartbreaking honesty. When Hermione tries to explain Cho's behavior, she says, she's feeling very confused because she likes Cedric and now she likes Harry and she can't work out who she likes best. And then she was trying to talk to Harry about it, but you were a bit unhelpful, you see? It's a fair summary. But more than that, it reveals how isolated Cho truly was. No one, not even her friends, really understood the depth of her emotional struggle. Compare Cho's arc to that of Ginny Weasley. Ginny, too, began as a background character, shy, awkward, defined largely by her crush on Harry. But over the books, Ginny grows. She becomes fierce, athletic, bold. She stands her ground. The difference is that Ginny was given time, space, and story. Cho was given sorrow, then silence. Even Luna Lovegood, another Ravenclaw girl, is offered layers upon layers. Luna is odd, dreamy, brave in her own quiet way. She too loses someone, her mother, but her grief is written as something that shapes her, not consumes her. Cho's grief, by contrast, becomes her only defining trait. It's as though the narrative could not imagine her beyond Cedric's death. Fans of the series have long debated Cho's treatment. On forums and blogs, theories emerge. Some believe her role was deliberately downplayed to make room for Ginny. Others argue that Cho represented Harry's immaturity, his inability to understand real emotional complexity. Both may be true, but the underlying issue remains. Cho Chang was not allowed to grow. Consider this. If Cedric had not died, who would Cho have become? Would she have stayed with him? Would she have gone on to become head girl, maybe a professional Quidditch player? Would she and Harry have remained friends, even after the awkward date in Hogsmeade? These are not idle questions. They're questions that arise when a character is cut short before their potential is fulfilled. Even in the Battle of Hogwarts, Cho's brief return carries a hint of poignancy. She arrives to fight. She stands among those who resist Voldemort. But there is no reunion, no closure, not even a line of dialogue that reminds us of who she was. She's just one more figure in the crowd, once important, now eclipsed. The injustice lies not just in what Cho was made to represent, but in what she never got to be. She never got the scene where she finds peace. She never got the redemption arc. She never had a moment of triumph or clarity. Her narrative was defined by other people's decisions, Cedric's death, Marietta's betrayal, Harry's indifference. And yet, despite everything, readers remember her. Not as a footnote, but as the girl who cried in the tea shop, who looked at Harry with longing and confusion, who stood in the room of requirement with wand in hand, who tried. Perhaps that is her quiet strength. In a world of battles and betrayals, Cho Chang simply tried to survive. Rowling has since acknowledged this. In interviews, she called Cho's arc regrettable, admitting that she became a vehicle for grief rather than a character in her own right. "I think I did Cho a disservice," she said. "There was more to her, but I didn't show it. For fans who hoped for more, it's a bittersweet apology." In fan fiction and fan art, Cho lives on. Writers have reimagined her as an auror, a duelist, a professor. They have given her the story she never had, one of healing, of self-discovery, of agency. They've given her friends who understand her, and love that's not shadowed by ghosts. They've made her more than just the girl with tears. Cho Chang was never meant to be the tragic heroine of the Harry Potter series, but that's what she became, by omission. And in that she represents something larger, the cost of unfinished arcs, of characters lost in the tide of someone else's story. Her presence haunts the narrative like a spectre, not because of who she was, but because of what she could have been. In the end, maybe Cho's story is a lesson, not for the characters, but for us. In every tale of heroism, there are those whose stories go untold, whose names are whispered once, then lost, whose heartbreak is seen, but not explored. Cho Chang, Seeker of Ravenclaw, was one such name. She deserved more, and we as readers deserved the chance to know her. Number 22, Draco Malfoy's Missed Redemption. Draco Malfoy stood on the astronomy tower, pale and trembling, the wand in his hand as heavy as the future it was meant to shape. His chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid movements. Albus Dumbledore, weakened and disarmed, looked at him not with fear, but with a kind of quiet sorrow. "Draco," the headmaster said gently, "you are not a killer." In that moment, every scrap of bravado Draco had ever worn like armor crumbled. He could not do it. He could not become the thing Voldemort had tasked him to be. And with that silent refusal, Draco's story was meant to shift, meant to deepen. But it didn't. Up to that moment, Draco's narrative had been shifting slowly, layer by layer. The cruel boy from the Hogwarts Express, so quick with slurs and hexes, had grown quieter by the 6th year. Less laughter, more glances over the shoulder. He had inherited not just a task, but a legacy of darkness he was too young to fully comprehend. The mark on his arm, burned in place like a brand, was a badge of terror, not triumph. And when he stood in the room of requirement alone, weeping as the vanishing cabinet refused to cooperate, the truth was evident. Draco Malfoy was not a villain. He was a child trying desperately to save his parents. The Harry Potter series is filled with transformations. Neville Longbottom from coward to hero, Severus Snape from tormentor to tragic guardian. Even Percy Weasley, so obsessed with power, finds his way back to his family. But Draco? His path ends in ambiguity. We are given a flash of potential redemption at the tower, a boy lowering his wand, but never the journey that should have followed. Rowling herself admitted this. "Draco deserved more," she said in interviews. "He wasn't evil. He was a scared boy, raised in a dangerous ideology." She confessed to being constrained by the central narrative, too focused on Harry's arc to properly explore Draco's. And so the epilogue gives us a man with slicked-back hair, standing beside his wife Astoria and son Scorpius at King's Cross. No. Explanation. No closure. The storytelling problem lies not in Draco's initial redemption. Lowering his wand was powerful, unforgettable, but in the fact that it is never built upon. In Deathly Hallows, he becomes a silent figure, dragged along by his parents. At Malfoy Manor, he's asked to identify Harry. He hesitates. "I can't be sure," he mumbles. It's not bravery, not yet. But it's something, a crack in the old armor. Yet even then, he fades into the background, never allowed a moment of true choice. When Harry saves Draco from the fire in the Room of Requirement, the gesture is significant. Twice, in fact, Harry risks his life to save him. "That's twice I've saved your life now," Harry tells him in the rubble. But Draco doesn't respond. No thank you. No conversation. Just silence. And in that silence, a whole arc dies quietly. Imagine for a moment what could have been. Imagine a scene post-war where Draco returns to Hogwarts with the others, helping to rebuild the castle, or sitting silently beside his mother Narcissa at a trial, giving testimony that aids in the conviction of other Death Eaters. Even a single moment of contrition, a public statement, a whispered apology to Hermione, a glance of gratitude to Harry could have transformed him from a shadow into a human. Instead, Draco vanishes. In Cursed Child, we meet him again, older, sadder, a father, mourning the fragility of life. We learn he loved his wife dearly. We learn he cherishes Scorpius. And for the first time, we see that Draco Malfoy did change. But it's too late. The core series never shows us how. The redemption feels borrowed, stapled on from another story. There's a quote in Half-Blood Prince that captures it perfectly. After Dumbledore's death, when Snape drags Draco away from the tower, he shouts at him, "Go! Go!" And Draco runs, that's all. He doesn't fight, he doesn't look back, he doesn't ask about the consequences. He runs. A boy given a terrible burden chose flight over violence. That right there was the seed of a real arc, but it wasn't allowed to grow. The tragedy is that Rowling had, in her hands, one of the most relatable characters of the entire saga. Not everyone is a chosen one. Not everyone is brave like Neville or loyal like Ron. Some children are raised in ignorance, in fear, in pride. Draco's arc could have been the tale of a boy who unlearns hatred, who challenges the ideology of his father, who chooses to build instead of destroy, and instead he disappears behind the curtain of plot convenience. Lucius Malfoy was once powerful, confident, venomous. By the end, he is broken, and Narcissa, desperate to save her son, lies to Voldemort to ensure his survival. Is he alive? She asks Harry, and when he nods, she lies to the Dark Lord. That moment is among the most powerful in the series, a mother choosing her child over a tyrant. But Draco's response, again, we don't see it. No confrontation with his parents' choices, no visible reckoning. The readers were left to fill in the blanks. Did Draco feel guilt for what happened at the tower? Did he visit Dumbledore's grave? Did he seek forgiveness from the students he mocked and hurt? We'll never know. All we have is Rowling's post-series commentary. He grew up to be a better man than his father, but he never forgot what he was raised to believe. A compelling idea, but never shown, only said. The fans, of course, did not forget. Fan fiction exploded with stories of Draco's redemption. Some writers imagined him working at the Ministry, fighting against the very prejudices he once parroted. Others placed him in Muggle London, trying to blend in, learn, atone. These weren't fantasies, they were attempts to complete the story left unfinished, to give justice to a character who was in many ways robbed of his resolution. Even Tom Felton, who portrayed Draco on screen, voiced his wish for more depth. "I always hoped Draco would have a moment to prove he wasn't like his father," he said in an interview, "that he could choose differently." His performance in Half-Blood Prince is haunted. The weight of what he's been told to do presses visibly on his shoulders. You believe him, you ache for him, and then the films too abandon him. This is not to say that Draco should have been redeemed easily. No quick hug from Harry, no sudden best friend arc. Real redemption is hard. It requires loss, humility, action. Draco could have struggled, could have failed, could have alienated others while trying to change. But the point is, he never got the chance. His story ended the moment he dropped that wand. Contrast this with Snape. We are given memory, pain, explanation, his bitterness, his cruelty, all contextualized, if not justified. We understand Snape, we mourn him. But Draco? We're left only with a boy on a train platform, his face older, unreadable. Did he suffer? Did he learn? Did he try? There's something deeply human in watching someone crawl from the wreckage of their own making. Draco could have been that story, a child of privilege, taught to hate, forced to confront the truth, and slowly, painfully, choosing another way. Instead, the books move past him, and so he remains unfinished, a sketch, not a portrait. There's an old phrase, not all villains are evil, some are just lost. Draco Malfoy was lost, and in the end, the story left him there. We are told he found his way out, but we are not invited to walk that path with him. And for a series so deeply rooted in the power of choice, of growth, of transformation, that omission feels like a betrayal. In the quiet corners of the fandom, Draco lives on. In whispered apologies, in hesitant steps towards something better. In imagined letters to Hermione, in secret acts of reparation, but in canon, he is a ghost, present but hollow, a boy who could have changed the world in a small, vital way, but was never given the pages to do so. Draco Malfoy should have been the story of quiet redemption, a tale for those who were not born heroes, but might still choose to become human. Number 23. Mad-Eye Moody's off-screen death. Of all the deaths in the Second Wizarding War, few feel as jarring and unjust as that of Alastair Mad-Eye Moody. The grizzled Auror, who had survived countless duels, outwitted more Death Eaters than anyone else, and lived a life marked by unrelenting vigilance, met his end not in a blaze of glory, but in a fleeting sentence buried within the chaos. Mad-Eye's dead, Lupin says flatly in Harry Potter and the Deathly Hallows. That's it. No last stand, no final words, no witness to the fall of a man who had once been the most feared hunter of the dark. This wasn't just any Order member. This was the Mad-Eye Moody, the scarred legend whose very presence sent a chill down the spine of dark wizards, the man who trained generations of Aurors who never once flinched in the face of Voldemort's return, and who, despite a life of battle and trauma, never gave in to fear. He was more than a fighter, he was a symbol. Moody embodied the raw, unfiltered cost of war, the limp, the missing eye, the magical paranoia, the lost friends, and yet he kept fighting. His death, according to J.K. Rowling herself, was meant to reflect the brutality of war. It was deliberate, she admitted in a 2007 interview. I wanted the readers to feel that this was a time where even the most experienced fighters could fall, just like that no one was safe. And yet, she also confessed regret. I do think Mad-Eye deserved more. He was a real hero. If I could rewrite anything, I'd give him a proper farewell. For a series built on epic confrontations and emotional goodbyes, Moody's off-stage death remains one of the starkest omissions. Consider the weight of what he'd done up until that point. When Dumbledore needed someone to spearhead the protective efforts around Harry, he called on Moody. When the Order of the Phoenix reassembled, it was Moody who coordinated operations, planned missions, and stayed 2 steps ahead of Death Eater infiltration. He was more than just muscle. He was a tactician, a strategist, a survivor of the old wars. It was he who warned the others constantly, "Constant vigilance!" That line wasn't just a mantra. It was his truth, and it kept him alive far longer than anyone had the right to expect. It's especially bitter because Mad-Eye's entire arc is built on resilience. He was the man who, even after Barty Crouch Jr. imprisoned him in a trunk and stole his identity for a year, returned to the world with even more fire. He didn't crumble, didn't retreat into bitterness. Instead, he rejoined the Order, risked everything again, and remained a figure of strength even when others faltered. He never wavered, he never rested. That he died during the Seven Potters mission, a high-risk operation to move Harry to safety, makes the lack of detail even harder to bear. We're told he was hit by a killing curse from Voldemort himself, and that his body fell from his broom, vanishing into the night. No one found him, no one buried him. Kingsley saw it happen, but even he could only say it was quick. Just like that, the greatest Auror Britain had ever known was gone. Compare this to the deaths of Dobby, Fred, or even Snape. They each had closure, emotionally resonant, if tragic, ends. Dobby dies cradled in Harry's arms, freed and loved. Fred dies in the heat of battle, surrounded by family. Snape, though controversial, is given a layered, heartbreaking death with revelations and tears. But Mad-Eye, a single line, no scene, no struggle, no one even saw his face. This wouldn't feel so empty if not for how richly textured a character Moody was. From the moment he appeared in Goblet of Fire, or rather when Barty Crouch Jr. impersonated him, he cast a long shadow. The false Moody taught students unforgivable curses and used terrifying lessons, yes, but it was real Moody who stood by the idea of arming young wizards with the truth. When he finally appears as himself in Order of the Phoenix, he's gruff, sharp, and immediately effective. He protects Harry at every turn, and his magical eye, always spinning, becomes a symbol of the world watching, ever aware. When Harry walks into number 12, Grimmauld Place, and sees Moody's old booby traps still in place, dust stirred by invisible protective enchantments, we are reminded of how deep his sense of duty ran. He didn't just fight, he prepared, defended, and suspected. He was paranoid not by madness, but by necessity. And he was right. So often, Moody's suspicions proved life-saving. Who else could have organized the extraction of Harry with such precision and care? The tragedy is amplified by the way his memory is handled. After his death, the Order mourns. Briefly. A glass is raised, but the war marches on. The focus shifts. Even Harry, who deeply respected Moody, moves on quickly. There is no grave, no eulogy. And while perhaps that's the point, that war gives no time for tears, it still feels like a betrayal. For readers, Moody deserved to go out fighting, wand in hand, curses flying, defiant to the last breath. Imagine the scene that could have been: Mad-Eye flying through the stormy skies, leading the decoys. Voldemort appears, and instead of retreat, Moody turns to face him. He knows he's outmatched. Who could truly duel the Dark Lord alone? But he doesn't run. He raises his wand. He shouts, "Protego Maxima," shielding George and Lupin. Lightning crashes. Voldemort yells, "Avada Kedavra!" And Mad-Eye's last act is to dive, taking the hit to save another. His eye, the eye that saw through lies and shadows, closes one final time. That scene never came. Instead, we're left with the echo of Lupin's grim voice and the cold realization Moody is gone. That's it. Rowling, perhaps feeling the press of narrative urgency, chose realism over romance. But even in war stories, the passing of giants deserves a pause, especially a giant like Mad-Eye. His magical eye becomes a grim trophy. Umbridge later mounts it on her office door, a grotesque reminder of how the heroes fall and the villains desecrate. When Harry sees it, he doesn't let it stand. He takes the eye down and buries it, silently honoring the man who gave everything. Mad-Eye would not have wanted to be used like that, Harry thinks. It's the quietest, saddest gesture, not a battle cry, but a whisper in the rubble. It's telling that the last people to speak of Moody are Harry and Bill. Bill confirms the body was never recovered. He was lost, vanished, no pyre, no headstone, just a story cut short. And it's that silence, that absence, that makes his death feel so unjust. He gave the war everything, and in return, he got a single paragraph. In a series that so often revolves around memory, legacy, and honoring the dead, Mad-Eye's disappearance feels out of place. Even Sirius, who also fell through a veil with no body, got more emotional weight. Harry mourned him for chapters, dreamt of him, spoke to his memory. But Moody? He became a footnote. Yet perhaps that's the final commentary on war, that it doesn't care about legacy, that even the strongest can be swept aside, their stories unfinished. But readers care. Fans remember. They imagine the battle Moody deserved, the words he might have spoken. Something like, "Tell Potter, keep watching, the war's not over." a message, a spark, a final blaze. Rowling has said that she now feels Mad-Eye should have had more time, more space, more weight. "I regret not giving him a scene," she told fans, and she's not alone in that regret. For readers who grew up respecting the scarred aura, his death remains one of the least satisfying moments in the saga. Ultimately, it's not just about spectacle, it's about recognition. Moody was a survivor, a mentor, and a fighter who never backed down, a man who taught us that paranoia can be a form of wisdom, that sacrifice isn't always beautiful, and that some wars are fought long after the battle's end. He gave Harry not just protection, but knowledge, the kind that kept him alive in the darkest year of his life. In the end, all we're left with is memory, and maybe that's fitting, because Mad-Eye Moody was never about glory. He was about getting the job done, about standing when others fled, about knowing evil's face and still choosing to fight. His death may have been off the page, but his legacy burns hot in every reader who ever heard him shout, "Constant vigilance!" And maybe, just maybe, that's the true tribute. Number 24. Ignored Hufflepuff and Ravenclaw houses. It begins, as many things do in the wizarding world, in the shadow of the lion and the serpent. From the very first pages of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, readers are swept into a tale not of 4 equal houses, but of 2 houses locked in eternal war. Gryffindor and Slytherin dominate the narrative like twin stars in a sky where 2 others, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, exist only as distant constellations, faint and barely mapped. The sorting ceremony, meant to introduce all 4 houses with equal grandeur, already betrays the imbalance. "You might belong in Gryffindor," sings the sorting hat, "where dwell the brave at heart," bold and rousing. Or perhaps in Slytherin, you'll make your real friends. Ambitious, dangerous, but Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Ravenclaw, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind. Then we are whisked away to watch Harry's eyes follow the sorting hat down only 2 paths, the house he dreads and the one he joins. It is not just Harry's bias. The narrative itself seems to forget the other half of Hogwarts. Consider the first-year students sorted into Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff. Do you recall Megan Jones sorted into Hufflepuff or Terry Boot sorted into Ravenclaw? Their names flicker like candlelight, mentioned once, maybe twice, then swallowed by the long shadow of Gryffindor's dormitory. Neville stumbles, Ron jokes, Hermione shines, and Harry fights. Meanwhile, characters like Susan Bones, Hannah Abbott, and Anthony Goldstein linger in the margins of the page, spectres of potential never explored. Rowling has admitted it. She was too focused on the Gryffindor-Slytherin rivalry. It was a grand narrative, good versus evil, light against dark, the righteous versus the cunning. It worked, but it came at a cost. "I suppose I did ignore the other 2 houses," she said in an interview, her voice tinged with the regret of an artist who saw the missed brushstrokes after the canvas dried. She even apologized to fans of Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff. Yet in the pages of the books the correction never arrived. No chapter begins. Luna and Padma waited at the Ravenclaw table. No subplots unfold in the cosy common room of Hufflepuff, with its barrels and honey-coloured light. We know the Gryffindor common room intimately, its roaring fire, squashy armchairs, and portrait of the fat lady. We know Slytherin's dungeon lair, its green glow and echoing water. But where is Ravenclaw Tower in our hearts? The books tell us it's high in the west, guarded by riddles, and yet Harry never sets foot inside. We are left with Luna Lovegood's dreamy voice and a glimpse of an eagle-shaped knocker. That is all. The cleverest students in the school, and we are given only riddles we never hear, and a tower we never enter. Then there's Hufflepuff, the house that became a punchline. "Everyone says Hufflepuff are a lot of duffers," Draco sneers in Philosopher's Stone. And the insult lingers. Cedric Diggory is the only Hufflepuff with real narrative weight, and even he exists largely to die. His role is noble, brave, even romantic, but he is not explored deeply. We do not hear Cedric's thoughts, nor sit beside him at breakfast. We do not know his ambitions, his fears, or the names of his friends. His death breaks Harry, yes. But even in tragedy, Cedric serves the Gryffindor narrative. There were opportunities, brief and shining, where the other houses tried to step forward. In Order of the Phoenix, Luna Lovegood arrives with radish earrings and belief in Nargles, and the story finally gives Ravenclaw a soul. But even then she is portrayed as strange, an oddity, rather than a champion of her house. Padma Patil, also Ravenclaw, is reduced to a disappointed date at the Yule Ball. Cho Chang has moments, grief, romance, loyalty, but she is mostly a mirror for Harry's confusion. Her identity as a Ravenclaw rarely informs her actions. And what of Hufflepuff in Goblet of Fire, when the Triwizard Tournament gives Hogwarts a chance to unite? Instead of rising in solidarity, Hufflepuff turns on Harry. "I'm not asking anyone to stop rooting for Hufflepuff," Harry says, frustrated. But their hostility reveals how little Rowling explored their house dynamics. Wouldn't the loyal and just students of Helga Hufflepuff have stood beside the boy who saw Cedric fall? We are told they are kind, but when kindness mattered most, their silence was deafening. Even the teachers reflect the imbalance. Professor McGonagall is a lion through and through, stern, brave, protective. Snape, the Slytherin head of house, is complex, morally twisted, and ultimately redeemed. But who is Professor Sprout, beyond herbology? What dreams does she hold? What battles did she fight? She's kind, yes. She helps nurse the petrified students with mandrakes. She stands tall at the Battle of Hogwarts, but her inner world remains unexplored. And Professor Flitwick, small and bright-eyed, a duel master with a sharp wand, he is charming but peripheral. In the final battle, all houses come together, at least in theory. Then Ravenclaw will have to do their bit, and the Hufflepuffs too, says McGonagall in Deathly Hallows. And they do, but it is Neville, the brave, the Gryffindor, who kills Nagini. It is Harry, Hermione and Ron who lead. Luna shines briefly, but again in the role of support. Cho wants to guide Harry to Ravenclaw Tower, but Ginny interjects. The tower remains off limits. The Eagle Knocker never speaks. Some fans have argued that the lack of detail was intentional, that Rowling, writing from Harry's point of view, showed us only what he saw. But this explanation rings hollow when we remember that the narrative often dips into other minds. We see into Snape's memories, into Dumbledore's past, into Voldemort's very thoughts. Surely we could have spent a few moments in the Ravenclaw common room, or seen the Hufflepuff strategizing in their cozy den, but Rowling's pen stayed on its favoured path. Consider the trio of Ginny, Neville and Luna in Deathly Hallows. They lead the resistance at Hogwarts while Harry is away. This could have been a golden moment for all houses, but Neville is the leader, Gryffindor again. Luna is present, brave and mystical. But it is Ginny, again Gryffindor, who takes charge. Where are the other Ravenclaws, the other Hufflepuffs? They remain unnamed, unseen, uncelebrated. And yet within fandom a quiet rebellion brews. Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff have found new life in the hearts of readers who saw themselves not in Harry's sword, but in Luna's quiet wisdom, in Cedric's silent nobility. Fan fiction, headcanons and art have filled in the blanks Rowling left behind. The Hufflepuff common room is imagined as warm, filled with earth tones, herb pots and baked goods. The Ravenclaw Tower, a sanctuary of thought, with floating candles and parchment skies. The fans did what the books did not. They gave them life. Still the harm of omission lingers. The Sorting Hat sings that Hogwarts is divided and that is wrong. But the books too are divided. The war between Gryffindor and Slytherin is a false dichotomy. What of the students who value knowledge above valor, who seek fairness over ambition? They are not mere background players, they are Hogwarts too. It is telling that the house traits are so flatly defined. Gryffindors are brave, Slytherins are cunning, Ravenclaws are smart, Hufflepuffs are kind. But what of nuance? Are there no cunning Ravenclaws, no brave Hufflepuffs? Are Slytherins never kind? The books often reinforce these stereotypes rather than challenge them. There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin, says Hagrid, and we believe him because the story offers no counterproof. What if, instead, we had known more about Ernie Macmillan, a proud Hufflepuff who stood by Harry in Order of the Phoenix? What if his loyalty was explored as deeply as Ron's? What if Michael Corner or Terry Boot had real arcs, showing us that Ravenclaw wit could shape the world, not just answer riddles? What if Zachariah Smith, the cynical Hufflepuff, had been allowed growth, moving from skepticism to sacrifice? Instead, we return again and again to the same narrative shores. Gryffindors save the day, Slytherins threaten it, the rest cheer or boo. The final tally of House Cup points becomes a symbolic victory, but what does it teach? That being bold is better than being kind, that the cunning should be distrusted and the curious kept at arm's length. In the aftermath of the series, Rowling hinted she might delve deeper into the lesser-known houses. She acknowledged the imbalance. "I think I gave Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff the short end of the stick," she said. "If I were to go back, I would do them more justice." But the story is finished. The ink has dried. The Great Hall has emptied. And yet, the forgotten houses endure. In every fan who wears a yellow scarf or pins an eagle to their chest, they live on. In every quiet thinker, every fair friend, every soul who values justice over glory, they shine. Perhaps their silence in the books mirrors real life. The loudest voices often aren't the wisest. And history, even in fiction, is written by the victors. But for those who look deeper, past the roar of lions and hiss of snakes, there lies a world still waiting to be seen. A world of riddles and roots, of honesty and intellect, of loyalty and laughter, a world of blue and bronze, of yellow and black, the world of Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff. The world Rowling only sketched, but which readers have lovingly, fiercely brought to life. Number 25. Neglected Magical Creatures. It begins, as many things do in the wizarding world, in the shadow of the lion and the serpent. From the very first pages of Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone, readers are swept into a tale not of 4 equal houses, but of 2 houses locked in eternal war. Gryffindor and Slytherin dominate the narrative like twin stars in a sky where 2 others, Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, exist only as distant constellations, faint and barely mapped. The sorting ceremony, meant to introduce all 4 houses with equal grandeur, already betrays the imbalance. "You might belong in Gryffindor," sings the sorting hat, "where dwell the brave at heart, bold and rousing. Or perhaps in Slytherin you'll make your real friends, ambitious, dangerous, but Hufflepuff, where they are just and loyal. Ravenclaw, where those of wit and learning will always find their kind." Then we are whisked away to watch Harry's eyes follow the sorting hat down only 2 paths, the house he dreads and the one he joins. It is not just Harry's bias. The narrative itself seems to forget the other half of Hogwarts. Consider the first-year student sorted into Ravenclaw or Hufflepuff. Do you recall Megan Jones sorted into Hufflepuff, or Terry Boot sorted into Ravenclaw? Their names flicker like candlelight, mentioned once, maybe twice, then swallowed by the long shadow of Gryffindor's dormitory. Neville stumbles, Ron jokes, Hermione shines, and Harry fights. Meanwhile, characters like Susan Bones, Hannah Abbott, and Anthony Goldstein linger in the margins of the page, spectres of potential never explored. Rowling has admitted it. She was too focused on the Gryffindor-Slytherin rivalry. It was a grand narrative, good versus evil, light against dark, the righteous versus the cunning. It worked, but it came at a cost. "I suppose I did ignore the other 2 houses," she said in an interview, her voice tinged with the regret of an artist who saw the missed brushstrokes after the canvas dried. She even apologized to fans of Ravenclaw and Hufflepuff, yet in the pages of the books the correction never arrived. No chapter begins. Luna and Padma waited at the Ravenclaw table. No subplots unfold in the cosy common room of Hufflepuff with its barrels and honey-coloured light. We know the Gryffindor common room intimately, its roaring fire, squashy armchairs and portrait of the fat lady. We know Slytherin's dungeon lair, its green glow and echoing water. But where is Ravenclaw Tower in our hearts? The books tell us it's high in the west, guarded by riddles. And yet, Harry never sets foot inside. We are left with Luna Lovegood's dreamy voice and a glimpse of an eagle-shaped knocker. That is all. The cleverest students in the school, and we are given only riddles we never hear and a tower we never enter. Then there's Hufflepuff, the house that became a punchline. Everyone says Hufflepuff are a lot of duffers. Draco sneers in Philosopher's Stone, and the insult lingers. Cedric Diggory is the only Hufflepuff with real narrative weight, and even he exists largely to die. His role is noble, brave, even romantic, but he is not explored deeply. We do not hear Cedric's thoughts, nor sit beside him at breakfast. We do not know his ambitions, his fears, or the names of his friends. His death breaks Harry, yes, but even in tragedy, Cedric serves the Gryffindor narrative. There were opportunities, brief and shining, where the other houses tried to step forward. In Order of the Phoenix, Luna Lovegood arrives with radish earrings and belief in Nargles, and the story finally gives Ravenclaw a soul. But even then, she is portrayed as strange, an oddity, rather than a champion of her house. Padma Patil, also Ravenclaw, is reduced to a disappointed date at the Yule Ball. Cho Chang has moments, grief, romance, loyalty. But she is mostly a mirror for Harry's confusion. Her identity as a Ravenclaw rarely informs her actions. And what of Hufflepuff in Goblet of Fire when the Triwizard Tournament gives Hogwarts a chance to unite? Instead of rising in solidarity, Hufflepuff turns on Harry. "I'm not asking anyone to stop rooting for Hufflepuff," Harry says, frustrated. But their hostility reveals how little Rowling explored their house dynamics. Wouldn't the loyal and just students of Helga Hufflepuff have stood beside the boy who saw Cedric fall? We are told they are kind, but when kindness mattered most, their silence was deafening. Even the teachers reflect the imbalance. Professor McGonagall is a lion through and through, stern, brave, protective. Snape, the Slytherin head of house, is complex, morally twisted, and ultimately redeemed. But who is Professor Sprout beyond herbology? What dreams does she hold? What battles did she fight? She's kind, yes. She helps nurse the petrified students with mandrakes. She stands tall at the Battle of Hogwarts. But her inner world remains unexplored, and Professor Flitwick, small and bright-eyed, a duel master with a sharp wand, he is charming but peripheral. In the final battle, all houses come together, at least in theory. "Then Ravenclaw will have to do their bit, and the Hufflepuffs too," says McGonagall in Deathly Hallows, and they do, but it is Neville, the brave, the Gryffindor, who kills Nagini. It is Harry, Hermione and Ron who lead. Luna shines briefly, but again in the role of support. Cho wants to guide Harry to Ravenclaw Tower, but Ginny interjects. The tower remains off limits. The eagle knocker never speaks. Some fans have argued that the lack of detail was intentional, that Rowling, writing from Harry's point of view, showed us only what he saw. But this explanation rings hollow when we remember that the narrative often dips into other minds. We see into Snape's memories, into Dumbledore's past, into Voldemort's very thoughts. Surely we could have spent a few moments in the Ravenclaw common room, or seen the Hufflepuffs strategizing in their cosy den, but Rowling's pen stayed on its favoured path. Consider the trio of Ginny, Neville and Luna in Deathly Hallows. They lead the resistance at Hogwarts while Harry is away. This could have been a golden moment for all houses, but Neville is the leader. Gryffindor again. Luna is present, brave and mystical, but it is Ginny, again Gryffindor, who takes charge. Where are the other Ravenclaws, the other Hufflepuffs? They remain unnamed, unseen, uncelebrated.